Salutations all, and welcome back to another kitchen adventure. Millions of videos on YouTube, and you chose to stop and check ours out, and for that, we are greatly appreciative. So, this is where the song that never ends has stopped. Today, we're going to chop up these lamb chops. Well, slice them, separate, whatever. You get the point. We're taking them out. Now, you're going to typically find in your stores either an Australian lamb chop or New Zealand. What's the difference? Not much, really. Some people will say the taste, some people will say the size. I promise you, it's all delicious. Let's just get into this new adventure. So before we jump into all the technical stuff, right, let's talk about what we're making today. So we're going to do an Italian seared lamb chop. I'm going to pair that with a nice cheesy truffled gnocchi. If you want to see the video on gnocchi, let me know. We can definitely make that happen. Super easy. Good way to get rid of leftover potatoes and whatnot. And then we're also going to throw in some veggies. You have to make it a well-rounded meal. So we're going to do some sauteed zucchini with a little sweet pepper. It's going to be mwah. Now, I wanted to show you guys something real quick, okay? So here is a cleaned rack of lamb, right? It's been Frenched, and we'll get into that, why they call it that. I mean, I'm sure it has something to do with Napoleon. Versus this, right? So you can see the difference there. That's pretty petite in comparison. Now, when we start to clean this, I'll be explaining again like the technique on it, but keep in mind that it's one of those more expensive meats. You're going to pay for it by the pound. You're going to have to trim off a lot of the goodness on it. Okay, just because it's edible doesn't mean that it's good, and that's why you need to choose your meats properly, because you don't want to have to throw away a bunch of extra fat that you just spent all this money on, right? So when you're looking for your rack of lamb, try to find one with just a little less fat than the other ones. It'll really save you some money down the end of the road. All right, so let's get into the technical stuff. We're going to clean up this other rack. We're going to French it. We're going to talk about how to keep it pretty, keep the bones nice and sexy when we put it into the oven to finish it off. But you'll see. Let's get into it.
All right, so the first thing we're going to do, make sure you have a nice sharp knife. I prefer something that you can easily, manipulate and get in there in between those bones. So if you're looking at the rack, you can see where that bone is going to come down on the meaty side, right? And then you're going to see where your top part of your chop is going to be. And that's important to know where you're at so you don't end up cutting off a really good portion of the chop versus the fatty portions, right? So that's what I'm showing you here. So we want to get as close down to the meat as possible. And so first thing we're going to do, just like our New Year's resolution, we're going to trim this fat right on off of there. And once you've made that first cut, as you can see, it peels off for the most part almost all the way, right? So it makes really easy work of itself. So we're taking off this first layer of fat. We don't really want all of that on a delicious chop. A roast, a leg, something that's going to cook for a longer period of time is, we could keep a lot more of that fat on there because we're going to render it down, right? But not with our chops. So we got that first piece of the cap off. And that's why we talk about also purchasing food by weight. Because you can see we've taken a good portion of what we've already paid for off. And so we always want to try to find ways to utilize it. We don't want to necessarily just throw something away. If we could figure out another way to turn it into something delicious, then we should definitely do that because that's your money, right? The store's already got what they wanted, so we want to save every penny. So now we're just taking off the second section of that fat cap on the chops there. So you can see already how much we've taken it down. Now that particular rack is a lot bigger than the other one there. But you get the point, right? You go from something big and hearty where we're paying by weight, and now we're chopping it all off. So the little bit of remaining fat that we have, we're going to score it. And if you've seen the duck video, we talk about why we do that. We score it up a little bit to help that fat to melt away, and it'll leave a nice and crispy outer layer for us. So you can try to show you that. Sorry about the camera work. Did a little scoring there, and we'll make sure that we rub our seasonings down into that as well. So the next part that we're doing, and this is totally extra, well, part of it anyway, right? So we want to get rid of the little bits of fat and scrap and stuff in between our individual chop. So in between the bones, we're gonna remove that little bit there. And once you've done that, you can actually roast the whole thing. I believe it's called like the King's Crown or something like that. They used to do with ribs, for presentation. But so you can see we've got that all out. And for presentation purposes, if you want, again optional, you can scrape away as much of the flesh and the skin and things like that that's attached to that bone. And the reason that we do that is once we put it into the oven, if you want for presentation, for that bone to be nice and white, you want to get all of the fleshy stuff off because anything fleshy is going to cook and turn brown. So the cleaner you can get the bone prior to cooking, the sexier it'll look on a plate. And again, completely optional. That's for presentation purposes when you're trying to impress folks. And all I'm doing is running that blade up and down the bone to scrape that stuff away. And this particular process is called Frenching. Every now and then you'll see it on chicken, drum mat, like heirloom chicken or something like that. You can tell by the name probably where it originated from. But anywho, so there we go. We've got that all cleaned up. Right, boom, boom. And again, just want to show you what we went from to what we are now. Cleaned and Frenched and about ready to be seasoned up. So, alright, before we get to seasoning, what I'm going to do with this aluminum, or aluminium for my British friends, is to cover those bones. And again, that's just to preserve the color of the bones for presentation purposes. And you'll kind of see when it comes out of the oven what I mean. So we're going to cover that up. And you can do each individual one if you like. I wouldn't particularly serve it with the aluminum on there, but to each their own. So I've got those wrapped up. What I'm seasoning these with is a mixture of salt, pepper, and a little bit of garlic. And then we're going to hit it with some good old dry Italian seasoning. So the reason that I'm not really worried about your measurements on that, because that's on you. Some people are salt sensitive, so go with what you know for yourself. But again, that's salt, pepper, garlic, granulated garlic, not powdered, and Italian seasoning. And we're going to hit it on both sides. And you can go a little heavier than you think you should, because as it cooks and that fat renders, a lot of that's going to drip away from the meat anyway. Now, once I've got the Italian seasoning, which we're adding now, I'm going to set these aside for just a few minutes because we want that Italian to rehydrate, right, from the juices of the lamb itself. You want it to begin to rehydrate. Plus, we have other aspects that we want to get to. But before that, so I was talking about not wasting. So underneath that fat cap, you can see we've got a little bit of meat there, right? I mean, it's not enough to make a whole sandwich, but it's better than wasting. So something that I like to do, we'll take that, slice it up really, really thin. And then I throw it into a nice pan and cook it down a little slow till that fat renders and it'll become nice and crispy. So it's almost like a lamb bacon. Alright, but anyway, on to our sauce. So we're going in with our easy cheese or extra melt for those in the industry or Velveeta, whatever you want to use. You can use cheddar, whatever cheese you like. Going in with that, that is a half stick of garlic and herb. That's Kerrygold brand butter. It is a delicious butter. A little expensive, but it is delicious. And then our white truffle oil. Now we just want a few drops. White truffle is a very potent, very strong, deliciously flavorful oil if you've never had it. So you want to go easy with that. Remember, you can always add more, but you can't take away. And then we're going to go in with a little bit of our heavy cream. Now you can see I've got 2 pots working there, and that's a double boil. Oh, and don't forget the salt, about a teaspoon of salt to start. The reason we do the double boil is so that I don't have to worry about my cheese melting, sticking to the bottom of my pan and scorching, or my cream scorching. So we let that go. As you can see, the cheese sauce is done. Alright, so we're going to pull that out, and we've already got hot water down, right? So why waste that? We're going to pull that pot out. We're going to add a little more water to this pot, and I'm going to hit the water with a little bit of salt so that we can cook our gnocchi. And again, if you guys want to see a video for the gnocchi, let me know. It's super easy. Alright, so we got our seasoning rubbed in, and we're going to put our fat side down first. I did not put any oil into the cast iron. The cast iron's got nice and hot. And I'm starting with that larger rack first because obviously it's going to take a little longer to cook. So this has actually been down for about a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and you can see we started to get some color on that side. Once I started getting the color, we're going to add that smaller one in there. I've got my oven set at 375 degrees, and I let it cook on that side. It was probably about 2.5 to 3 minutes before I flipped it on the larger one, so probably like a minute and a half, 2 minutes on the smaller one. So once I start getting my color, I'm going to flip them over, and we're not going to really leave them on the stove very long. We're going to go ahead and pop them into the oven and let them finish off. Now, for the larger rack, I would say it took about 10 to 12 minutes at 375 to get us to a medium. But all right, so we had a rolling boil on our water, and so we're going to go in with gnocchi. Once you get it in there, you can give it one quick stir to make sure they kind of separate and don't completely stick together, and you just let it ride. You're going to know it's done when they float. Okay, so when they float, you're good to go. See. All right, so I strained the gnocchi. I've got that sitting on the side. Got my saute pan really nice and hot. Now these are the mini peppers that you'll find, and typically sometimes they'll have Fresnos in them, but they are generally a sweet, small bell pepper, or in the bell pepper family. So we added a little oil to that pan, and I'm just trying to get a nice little char, a little sear on the outside, so you can see a little bit of that color there. And that's all we're really looking for. Give them a little color. I don't want them to be too soft before we add our zucchini, right? Because we don't want them to turn to mush. And then we added our zucchini. And I'm going to hit this with just a little bit of salt and pepper. Just a little bit. Because we want the natural flavors of these vegetables to come through. Because we've got salt on the lamb, we've got salt in the water for the gnocchi, we've got all this salt and sodium and things like that. And we want to balance our flavors out. So that's why I went with the sweet peppers there. So you're going to let that cook until your zucchini is tender. Alright, so now we're going to do up our gnocchi. Several ways that you can do this. One, obviously, you can see I like to use my electric skillet for this. And I'm going to start off by caramelizing some onion. And this is yellow onion. And I choose the yellow onion because it's a little sweeter. And once it begins to caramelize, it's just a nice, sweeter flavor. It's not quite as spicy, if you will, as white onion would be. And I did that so that the sweetness of the onion will complement the sweetness of the peppers. It's a whole political game we play in the kitchen. So once we start getting some color on that, I'm just making a little bit of room, and I'm going to throw my gnocchi in there. I'm going to add a little bit of oil to the pan. I don't know if you guys are going to see that part. I can't remember. I apologize. But we're going to add a little bit of oil to the pan, and in essence, you can toast your gnocchi once it's in. So you can add oil to the pan. You can move it around until they start to brown. So I'm going to let those sit for a minute to get a little color. Remember, color is flavor. And once I feel satisfied with the amount of time that they're in there, I will end up turning that heat down and adding my sauce. So you saw me add a little bit of that oil in there just to get in the bottom of the pan. And I turn my heat off, obviously, before you add your sauce, otherwise you're going to end up burning that sauce at the bottom of your pan. And you know the sound it's supposed to make, just like mac and cheese. All right, so remember to allow the meat to rest, okay? You want to at least let it to rest up to 10 minutes. Now, I didn't do the best job of cleaning those, but you get the point, right? You can see where the bone is nice and white. Now, when you go to cut, you can see the joints here, right? The joints of those ribs. And so you're going to just work the knife in between those joints and boom, lamb chop. And then the plate up. And again, plate it up as you like. Kind of stuck in the habit of center plating. Comes with the job. Same thing with odd numbers. Something about aesthetically pleasing, so you always notice threes and fives. But anywho, all right, that was it, right? Italian lamb chops, truffled gnocchi, and sauteed peppers and zucchini.
So that is it, my friends. The song has come to an end. You now have delicious lamb chops. Please let me know how they turn out. I haven't even tasted mine yet, so I hope you're eating yours while you watch this. So again, easy peasy, straightforward, simple dishes. I know it seems daunting. It's a lot of work that goes into it, but for that special occasion or that special someone, pull this bad boy out of your repertoire. See how far it gets you in life. Again, thank you guys for coming in and joining us on another adventure. Please comment below. Let me know what you want to see. Nothing that we have met that we can't cook. We will make it happen if you ask for it. All right, guys. Have a good one.